and I think I'm looking not so bad. Anyway.
Okay, so we should be live soon. I will wait for to see our signal on YouTube. There you are. Yeah, great, awesome. Okay, so hi, I'm Brian. We are here with most of the core team. This is the Q&A for April 2019, and we have received a bunch of questions, which are great. We have already discussed some of them, so and we will be able to receive more input from your side through the chat on YouTube if you want to submit something there. I need, and I want to say thanks to all the sponsors. 84 Codes is the main one, together with Manas nowadays, and for sure with all the community, the efforts in a lot of ways that you are investing in time, code, issues, discussions. Everything is welcome to make this move forward. So we have received a bunch of questions that go from between the language, the compiler, platform and production support, the project management aspect of crystals, community, and some questions regarding Manas. We will try to go through that through this session, whatever it lasts. But first of all, we can go on a round of introduction. As I said, I am Brian from Argentina, working at Manas, and there are many guys here on my left and down here. So we can go in around. I don't know, Adi, I think you're there. Yeah. Or you want to go first, and then we can go through.
I'm here. Yes, I can go first. So I'm Adi. You probably know me from GitHub, Asterite or Asterite. I don't know how it's pronounced originally. And yeah, mostly these days I'm following the conversations, keeping more or less the direction of the language clear, and sending a couple of pull requests and fixing up many bugs. Who wants to go next?
Ping someone like Chris. Do you want to go next?
Yeah, sure. My name's Chris, better known on GitHub as RX14, and I've been working on Crystal Core team for probably about 2 years now, a little less than 2 years. Got involved, started out just as a community contributor, and worked my way up from there, I guess. But it's been fun working on Crystal, and I'm really enjoying it. So that's me.
Jones, do you want to go next?
Yeah, hi. Do you hear me?
Yep.
Okay,
yes,
yeah,
we can hear.
I was worried my microphone didn't work. Yeah, I'm Johannes, or known as Straight Shooter on GitHub. I'm the newest member of the core team, and I'm really happy to have joined. Yeah, so hey everyone. I'm looking forward to this first Q&A with me.
Cool. Sardar, your turn.
Hi there, I'm Sardar, aka Sedo. I've been into Crystal since 2014, and I've been maintaining Kemal for close to 4 years now, and I've joined the core team in 2018, and it's been a great experience and fun working with everyone, and yeah.
Cool. Okay, we can go through the through some of the questions. We can go from topic, so we can first maybe discuss about language. We go through on the compiler and other topics. Again, feel free to start saying, move on to the next topic, or raise some other comment through the chat, and we will try to catch up as on live. But we are more used about coding than doing this Q&A thing, so we might struggle a little bit to keep up.
Catch up.
Yeah. So one of the questions we received about the language by Romain Franceschini is about if we had a decision for on topics like covariance and traverse. And I found that topic very interesting on one side. I love language, the typing aspect of the language. And actually this question kind of motivated a lot of discussion between us. It is something that we didn't discuss every now and then because we are focused more on issues. So it's great to have these as triggers for us speaking a bit more about some aspect of the futures. From my understanding and my point of view is that some aspect of the language, although can be discussed earlier, they're not mandatory in 1.0, for example. And contravariance and covariance is one example. For example, we can compare in other language like .NET or Go, that the first releases didn't include even generics, for example, and they went just okay. We got a bunch of features, and I think covariance and contravariance might left out from 1.0. Yet that doesn't avoid discussing early some aspects. That is specific for that topic. If any, we discussed a lot of the issues. I don't know if any of the other members want to complete or make their own answer to this. Unmute yourself if you want to say something. Oh, yes. Okay. We can go to the next topic if nobody wants to add something there. The other aspect was, for example, reading considering to allow fibers to be pinned on one thread specifically. That was also from the same person, from Romain. I know Chris cares about that issue. Do you want to handle this one?
Yeah, sure. I think that it's very useful for C code to be able to pin a fiber to a thread, because for interacting with C libraries, there are a lot of C libraries out there which require you to always interact with the C library from a single thread. So it's quite a useful feature, and I think any design of multi-threading that we have will be able to have that option. Can't promise anything because it's not implemented yet, but it's definitely up on the agenda.
Yeah, I expect during the next couple of weeks to have some more discussion about the multi-threading, and we should handle this some way or another. Someone else want to add something here? 1, 2, 3. Nope. Okay. Well, the other question was about regarding the language, was about the pipe operator. It was asked by Noah Summers. It was about if we are planning to add pipe operator or not to the language. Ari, want to?
Sure, I can handle that. If you can also handle my my baby crying in the background. So I think the pipe operator is great and really useful for functional programming languages. But I don't think it's that useful for Crystal, for an object-oriented programming where you call methods on objects. That's all I have to say. And I think it will make users have to learn something new when they can already use the language without it.
Another thing is that I think if you had two different ways to chain methods together, which is you can do method chaining by putting methods on objects, or you can have method chaining by taking something as the first argument in the parameter list. That's two different incompatible ways of doing method chaining. And having two different incompatible ways of doing something isn't the best way to design a language, because then you have to choose which one you want to use, and you can't use both. You have to use one or the other every time you write a method. That puts more cognitive load on the person who's writing code, and it puts more cognitive load on who if you're using the API as well, because you have to remember if each method is called one way or another. So overall, it doesn't really fit together well with the rest of the language. It fits together well with the rest of the language in functional languages where you don't have methods which you can call on objects. On languages which aren't object orientated, then the pipe operator is a very good way to compose methods together. But on an object orientated language, it turns out to be unnecessary and incompatible.
Yeah, I agree with both. In my experience, the pipe operator, I use it in functional programming, and there are other language semantics and syntax that blends better with having that. But in my experience there is mostly regarding Haskell or similar language, where you have currying and partial evaluation, and pipes blends better there than in object-oriented. Discuss it, not very inclined to do so for now. Lacking the compelling reason to do it. Okay, the next question, unless someone wants to point something out. Yep. Jack Thorne asked a very futuristic questions. Are there any plans on Crystal 2.0 and what you would like to see? From my point of view is that we are making a lot of effort to reach some stability regarding semantics and the language itself to release 1.0, among other things. And probably the first stories that will happen after 1.0 is about performance of the compiler itself, the ideas or top wishes that we have is about incremental compilation to decrease a lot of the times, but it's not about the language itself. I probably someone else wants to add something regarding future of the language itself and stability. I don't know, Chris, Ari, if you want to jump in.
Sure, yes. I think I'm not thinking right now in a 2.0 version. I think 1.0 should make a really good promise about not introducing breaking changes, and 2.0 maybe add new things, but again, don't introduce breaking changes, because then all of the ecosystem and all of the libraries will break, and that won't be good. So yeah, that's my expectation.
At least for syntax changes, it might be possible to look at how Rust has done it with language additions, but unfortunately that still doesn't allow you to make deeper changes to the language, because code still has to have the same core semantics in terms of the object model to work together across versions. So there's some things we can do to make the language to have breaking changes to the language after 1.0, but a 2.0 version where we break everything again, I think would need a very compelling reason to do that, and obviously 1.0 first.
And other topic regarding a Crystal 2.0 is that we haven't discussed is well, there was an issue that Ari bring at some point in the repository. It's about having a different understanding of the version of the language and the version of the standard library. When we speak about Crystal 1.0, it's about, I think, the language. The standard library will keep evolving, trying to avoid breaking changes. But the more is more important about the semantic of the language than the standard library, for example. And that story still needs to some evolution, I think. I will try to speak higher volume. My mic is in max already. Sorry for that. The other questions. Stan asked, can you make Crystal more like Python and less than Ruby? That's a tough question. I personally love the syntax that we have in Ruby. So I'm more inclined on that kind of language. I love the power of building DSLs in Ruby and the flexibility, the syntax. I didn't program that much in Python. I didn't find it compelling for me. But it's a matter of taste. So if you Crystal's ideas good, but the syntax you didn't like that much, there are other languages that kind of put that together. Like Onyx started like a spin-off from Crystal. You can check that language, or there are other ones. Basically, someone has another kind of suggestions for someone that loves Python and wants static typing as in Crystal.
My suggestion would be Nim for that, because it's exactly like Crystal, but in a Pythonic way, and it's been around longer than Crystal. And I think it's also a cool language too. So if you're into Python and if you are into more Pythonista way of things, then Nim may be a good candidate for you. Yeah.
I guess we would also need to know what he means by more Python and less Ruby. The first difference that comes to mind is the indentation white space. I don't know if, I'm sure there are many other differences. I'm not super familiar with Python, but I think, for example, the length of array you do differently. It's like a top-level method. And I think in that regard, Ruby is more clean, more like pure object-oriented. And then regarding indentation, if you have end at the end of blocks or even curly braces, you can use that to format your code. So for example, with the Crystal formatter, you can put if and then end, and then you run the formatter and it will automatically align all the code that's inside there. And there's no way to do that in Python, for example. You have to manually indent that. I don't know, I like that, for example. So that's one thing.
Yeah, for sure it's a matter of taste. So it's a tool, and each of us has its taste. For example, when I read Python, I find it like really different from Ruby. Like when you have an instance method, you need to put self in the Python, and in Ruby, if you have a class method, you need to put self in the method declaration. It was like totally opposite. I couldn't deal with that, so I stick with Ruby. But it was a funny difference. So another question regarding the language, again from Romain Franceschini. It was about support, about adding the concept of interfaces in the language in the future. He pointed that I mentioned it. But I think the motivation about interfaces was about being to express protocols of certain objects. Ari, do you want to? I think it was you, but I'm not sure if it was your proposal.
I think at one point we thought about interfaces instead of modules to be implemented. I can't remember it right now. What was it? Yeah, sorry, I can't remember. But one thing that interfaces would do is they would maybe require explicit types in the return type and method arguments. Then I'm not sure if interfaces are automatically implemented like in Go, or you have to include them or implement them. I think there was something that modules, I think modules can have, I think that this was it. Modules can define instance variables that are included inside other classes. And the instance variables then in separate objects can end up in different positions in the object's layout. And then you can't represent that interface. It's a bit complex, but you can't represent that interface with a single pointer, or because you have all this you need access to that instance variable. It's a bit complex to explain, and but interfaces won't allow you to define instance variables like any other languages. I think that was the purpose of interfaces, and that could work by having modules, by treating modules that don't declare instance variables as interfaces. But maybe an interface keyword would guarantee that intention. I don't know. It's something that we still have to design.
Having like more accurate or more specific tools to express the ideas is always like great, because it allows you to do more specific things in tooling and semantics of the language, rather than using generic. Like modules can be used for that, so maybe it's not needed because you have a workaround, but at the same time there is no constraint on what those modules can do. So having a more constrained concept allows you to do some stuff more interesting. It's all about I think that if to add that kind of concept, it probably is not in 1.0, and it will not generate trouble to add that later, because it's adding a feature, but it's far away in the. It's not in the roadmap, I think, right now. Okay, what else? Someone wants to add anything? Was there any other question regarding language itself that we saw before we move to another topic? Or model after interface? Yeah. Well, not about language, but it was about the runtime, and I don't have a category for the runtime. So Bar asked, can we get multi-threading right now. Everybody wants multi-threading. For sure, this kind of things evolve, but we, in the next release that should happen during the next week, next couple of days, I am writing the changelog. The GC will come already with an extension, with an extended API that will allow you to change, to support multi-threading. You probably already see a PR where me with Julian were discussing approaches and pros and cons and performance. That's the first step. Julian already did a lot of experiments and is trying different approaches for scheduling, and we are having some conversation, and probably will have some conversation more in the next couple of weeks with other members of the core team to move multi-threading forward. It's definitely one of the stories we want to push in the next couple of months or many weeks. But yeah, we should see activity on direction. That's about language. Yeah, I don't see any plans of Crystal native GC. That's a new one. But for now, I'm happy with Bohem. I don't see a need for a native GC, although it can eventually come. But it's not a change of a feature visible to the user other than runtime behavior. I think it's not a stopper if we have a native GC or Bohem. I think. That's my goal. Anyone wants to add something regarding the language specific that we didn't mention?
Regarding the GC, it's just native. The Bohem GC is a little slower than possibly a native GC that we could write, which was specific. So that's definitely a target post 1.0. Once we've got everything stabilized and once our main target is performance instead of stability and features, then rewriting the GC is something which we'll definitely look at, I think.
Great. Okay, let's move a bit on to talk about the compiler itself. Here, View asked a couple of questions. I think he was the one in this release that is starting to create some PRs regarding the semantic of the language, how the semantic of the language is implemented in the compiler, and it's great to see more people involved in the internals and understanding how things work. So the question was if there is any plans for compiler plugins. I would say not in 1.0. There is no roadmap for that. But this is going to evolve because it will allow us to shrink the compiler a lot, strip some of the tools. But I'm more worried about the tooling existing than if it's inside or outside the compiler. But that's just my opinion. Another, like, I'm not sure if it's about a plugin in the way other system works. Like you have you load a library on runtime to change the behavior. One of the idea in the initial time was, what if the compiler, instead of being a one-time tool that you run, is more about a reactive service that will expose some API and will analyze changes on the fly, so it can be more reactive and more performance regarding some changes. So, for example, that might impact in that story, whether it's like a way it's called. There are a lot of issues regarding the runtime of that. So it will be nice, no, but I don't find that rushing or important for 1.0. There are probably a lot of use cases that will benefit from that thing for sure. Chris, Adi, Johans, any opinion regarding plugins or in for the compiler or for any other program itself, like challenges or something that you want to share about that story?
No, just that plugins right now, the way Crystal is it works or is made, it's a bit difficult to write plugins, and sorry, I won't be able to speak much. But and also, I'm not sure about the idea of plugins, because then maybe some projects require some plugins and some not, and it's hard to maintain a uniform code environment or style. That's all I have to say.
Okay. The next story is about, the next question is about if there is intention to have an interpreter of the language to allow a faster user, or even at the cost of the code executing slower, but having a better feedback loop there by having an interpreter of the language. Someone, yeah, Chris, you're mute. You want to handle this?
I think I was perhaps the person who proposed this idea on IRC, and I think it would be a cool thing to try, but it's certainly not on any of the core team's radar as in terms of putting time down to work on it. Certainly it would be interesting to see, and I think it would be a very good tool if it was built for Crystal developers to have, but it's not. It would be very much an experiment, and it's not something which the core team is going to work on in the near future. I think it would be possible to reuse some of the code, but not very much of it. And I don't know. It's such an experiment, it's hard to make any predictions about it. So if you want to go do it, I really strongly encourage you to have a go at it. But there's other things on my plate, certainly right now.
Yeah, my afraid is like the size of the compiler, of the code of the compiler is a lot. So if it were to exist something that needs to hold the same semantics as the compiler, it needs to share a lot of the code base, because otherwise it's just two different implementation. It's hard even to have two implementation language semantics. So if it's not sharing a lot of the code base, it's not going to happen in my opinion. Yeah, I don't know, maintainability issues. Okay, so regarding the compiler, if there is something else someone wants to add, we, 1, 2, 3, nope. Okay. So there were other topics about platform and being production ready, for example. So regarding the platform support, the top one question that was asked like 4 times was Windows support. Do we have Windows support? Where is Windows support? So that was the question. The current status, the last efforts were mainly Office, and when he got some support to work on that full time, mostly, I think. I will say that eventually efforts can be going to do more on Windows from our side, like from Mana side. But nowadays, my focus is on language semantic, language construct that we need. That is also a cornerstone for reaching 1.0. But we want also Windows in 1.0. It's something that we want. I think that's all I have to say. Like, Chris, do you want to say something? I think you have like future plans regarding Windows or an agenda for that. Hopefully, it's not like a promise. It's like, well, what do you expect?
Yeah, I worked on Crystal last summer. Obviously, I'm a university student, so I only have limited time. So recently, I've been focusing on university and taking a little bit more of a break from Crystal. But I'm trying to get back up to speed with Crystal, and hopefully this summer I will have a lot more time on my hands, and I will be able to work on Crystal on Windows support some more. Certainly, I'll be working on Crystal in some capacity. In regards to the status of Crystal support, I got the compiler working and compiling a Hello World program on Windows, which worked, and was very happy when it worked. Just yeah. But unfortunately, those changes that I got that working in a branch of the of Crystal, and not all of those changes have yet made it upstream due to having to make them a lot more generic and robust. I was really very much hacking around in the compiler and doing exploratory work to make that happen. The most recent changes I did was some refactoring around process and the API for spawning and for creating new processes and having them run as children. And that's probably one of the last major pieces that needs to be merged back in. So support for spawning processes on Windows, because the compiler uses that internally to do various things, especially calling out to the linker and to link stuff together. So really it's just a matter of time and putting more work in to get the basic support working. And then from there on, the roadmap is looking at what in the core library, the prelude essentially, which bits of that are not working correctly on Windows, getting that completely perfectly down, and then expanding from that core base of libraries to work on the other requirable libraries like HTTP and sockets and other important libraries, OpenSSL, or, well, I'd like to make that a TLS module, but that's another story. But yes, as I said, expand on the base Windows support to get everything working, and hopefully sooner or later we'll be able to say that we have our entire spec suite running on Windows. But that's going to happen as a gradual process. Right now, the process is stalled largely because of lack of time on my part, and I apologize for that. But it's going to be a slow and steady process. It'll definitely be, I'd say, more than a year until that's ready. If I had to give a time estimate.
I think it doesn't need to be you all by yourself. I think what we need to do is choose a couple of 1 or 2 releases where we focus on moving forward the Windows support, and we only focus on that. And I'm pretty sure that there we can make it, because now we are focused on parallelism, but also on fixing some bugs and defining the semantics of the language. But we can stop for a couple of releases to focus on Windows if that's what most people want or what most people find useful.
Yeah, certainly that's something which is a lot more feasible once the compiler compiles the compiler works on Windows. I think that'll be one of the major hurdles to pass. Having a self-hosting compiler on Windows is really the target I'm aiming for, having that merged, and then from there it's a lot easier for people to go off and work in different directions and collaborate on Windows. It's certainly possible before then, but since I've already got it working in a branch on my own, I think it's certainly easier if people look at my work for what to merge in, even if I don't have time myself. But I think I'm going to hopefully start working on that again in the near future. But certainly I don't want the whole porting effort to be myself, because that would be a lot of work.
Yeah, I think like we already have quite good support of Windows for some parts of the standard library, which works via cross-compiling, and we've made some effort there in the last year. And I think this can continue parallel to the compiler porting. I think the main point which is holding this up right now is the fiber switch implementation. Yeah, which is unfortunately a little bit out of my ballpark of experience. But I think once we get this going, we can continue with other parts like I/O and fibers in general to have that going on Windows.
Yeah, there was also another question regarding why we have Windows as a requirement for 1.0, which was part of another question asked. And apart from that it's enormously popular that we want Crystal to work on Windows pretty quickly, another reason why we have it as a target for 1.0 is because it validates that the Crystal standard library is cross-platform. Now, currently, Crystal only runs on derivatives of Unix like Mac OS, FreeBSD, and Linux, of course. These all share quite a lot of the API that they use internally and quite a lot of the way the operating system works. And the standard library in certain parts, at least, is very much designed around the way that works. And since we can't make any breaking changes after the 1.0 release, it will be very useful for the stability of the language and to make it so that we have the language on Windows so that people can. So we have the language on Windows so that we know that the standard library is generic to more than just Unix-based POSIX operating systems, and it's available. The standard library is portable across platforms more than just Windows and Linux. That the design is good enough to work on more than just Unix, and that we can work on more than just Windows. Perhaps in the future, Google's Fuchsia OS will be a much more popular operating system and make its way onto the desktop, and then people will be asking us for support for that. And I think being able to support both Windows and Linux will allow us to much more readily port to something like Fuchsia and know that we won't have any problems making that have any problems where things just don't work on Fuchsia. Because if you look at the history of Ruby's Ruby and Windows, Ruby is one of the cases where the language standard library was written without Windows in mind, and a lot of people just completely avoid Ruby on Windows, and it works quite slowly, and it's not a very good experience to use Ruby on Windows, even though it supports it, and that's because it was released on Linux before Windows, and that's something that we want to avoid in Crystal.
There's been a question in the chat regarding Windows by Faustino, who asked what would be the major disadvantage of using Crystal on Windows. I'm not entirely sure what you mean, but I'd say, well, there shouldn't be any, I hope, besides using Windows, if that's a disadvantage. But I think in the end, Crystal should run on Windows as it does on Linux or on Mac or BSD, whatever.
There are certainly advantages and disadvantages to Windows and Linux, but that's a bit beyond the scope of Crystal. And I think Crystal should aim to utilize Windows and Linux to the best that it can. And then the rest is just down to the core differences between how how Windows and Linux are suited to different tasks. That's what I'd say about that.
As pretty much they cover everything. Like having good abstractions is great. Having good platform support will help adoptions. The disadvantages right now is like we might not have the right abstraction in some point, or we are assuming some stuff of the underlying platform to work faster. So we need to catch up there. That's why we want Windows support, definitely. And regarding other platforms, for example, there was also a mention about ARM. Whatever platform we add as a first-class citizen comes also with a story about infrastructure and being sure that we don't break things in the future. So it's not just about coding and making it work in your machine, but it's about being sure that other people won't break those things because they just don't use it. So that's also a hidden cost of adding more platforms. Yeah, it's like, it will be great. So first Windows and, well, ARM are much already some concept at the beginning using some Raspberry, for example, and we got pretty excited, but the main use case is running things on the cloud. But it's something that we would like to happen. There every now and then there are some experiments to make things work, but it won't be first-class citizen until we have the infrastructure and the tooling to avoid breaking things on every release. I guess this little CI config file will get even bigger and bigger and bigger. And the other question regarding platform support or linking actually is about static linking. In the next release, there is some improvement to facilitate that, as long as the linker helps you. It's so far the only platform that allows 100% static link is Muscle. The other has some workarounds, but it's you are bound to the platform. Not my area of more expertise. I push things a bit forward in my direction to be able to embed static libraries in the next release a bit more easily using the Crystal library path environment variable to come in 0.28. Okay, we can move about platform support. Windows it will be on 1.0. We are not moving that. We want that. I'm reading a bit of jokes in some of the chats. Is great. So the other question is about is Crystal production ready? And there's a lot of aspects on that question. I will say that one thing, besides all the current scope, the current status of the language and the ecosystem that are not easily like in other stacks, is about the team. If the team has no background on using static languages, if it doesn't know, if it doesn't feel comfortable with the syntax in Crystal, and that doesn't mean knowing Ruby. It's just if it doesn't feel comfortable with the concept of the language brings in, is a hard choice, because it's not only about the platform running, it's about the team being able to respond to build that. From there, it's about the ecosystem, and that's a lot in shared efforts between the community and us building the right building blocks to be able to call things faster, as nowadays we want. So, and usually it depends on the scope of your application. If you can start small and start checking. You will not jump to build a whole application right out of the blue to do that. There are access-based productions. Sertar, I think that you had some input there and experience, because you have pushed some production stories in the past, and hopefully in the future.
Yeah. Well, the thing is that I've been doing Crystal in production since 2016, which may sound crazy for most of the people. But the thing is that it depends on your context, and it also depends on your architecture. And the thing is that if you don't have a big like for me, from my experience, it's like my main thing is doing mostly web related stuff, which means it's mostly dealing with monoliths and microservices. And in Crystal's case, if you can scope the thing, like if you can create a good scope, and if you can kind of map the architecture fit into a good microservice, then I can easily say that Crystal is really good at that for 4 years. And I've been in many organizations, and I've deployed many applications. Some of them are still running without any hitches, and some of those applications were previously Ruby and having a lot of bottlenecks because of Ruby runtime performance issues and related to that. But switching to Crystal was kind of great for that kind of stuff. And also for Ruby's, it's really not so hard to switch to Crystal based web applications, unless they are Ruby unless they are not just Rails developers and more like Ruby developers. It's pretty easy. And at my current company, we are kind of doing non-web related Crystal stuff through mob programming style, which is like someone leads the session, teaching people Crystal and trying to port the project into Crystal 2 from Ruby. And it's been going on for 9 months. And from what I've seen, it's going pretty well. And Brian mentioned that not knowing static types or not using any statically typed languages before might be a hurdle. That's partly true, but the thing is that Crystal makes it, the compiler makes it really easy for someone to just start building productive stuff from day one. And like if the teams are kind of knowing what they are doing, then it's really feasible to use Crystal. And like I said, it's production ready for a while from my experience. But yeah, and I can, for me, I can say that it's mostly for the web stuff, but I'm now kind of going into more low level stuff. And from what I'm seeing for the last 9 months, it's also good for high throughput, high CP bond kind of stuff too. So I'm open to hear more stories, because I know that there are other companies using Crystal in other domains like machine learning and security, and yeah. So yeah, I mean, if you map the things in a good way, and if you keep the scope as narrow as possible for starters, then why not? Yep.
For example, another story, like I don't know if you heard, like Fast Ruby IO, although it says Ruby, is writing mainly in Crystal to run serverless Ruby and Crystal apps. So
yeah.
And that's their main stack. Like the core part of their system is written mainly in Crystal.
Yeah. One thing that, yeah, I just learned that the fast Ruby thing uses Kemal for their web thing, and like in Kemal Wiki we have 21 companies listed using Crystal in production. I mean, 21 is not a big number, but it's also, you know, something, and it shows that it's been doing good.
So, and the things that will be valuable, I think, for the community and for us is that everybody that is having some production first, like, spread the word, add to the wiki that we have, or suggest, if you're using Kamal, go to Kamal and say, hey, I want to be added in this honorable list of production. Because it's a valid concern. Some companies says, if it's not 1.0, I will not use it, and that is a valid rule. But it's arguable. We call 1.0 something, and other people call 1.0 the first very commit of their project. So it's a gray scale that you can have, and until you know a bit of the project, it's hard to judge. So I will say that yes, it's production ready. Depends on the context of the team, on the project. Just start trying small and see how it goes.
I'd like to add one more thing. The thing is that I think it's all about the value that it creates and it brings to whatever you are doing. For example, many of you remember Node.js back in 0.8 days or 0.6. I mean, it wasn't even 1.0, but the value it brought to the community and to developers was so great that no one cared about the 1.0 thing, and many companies jumped taking the risk. So I kind of feel the same about Crystal. Yeah, 1.0 matters, but as far as value, I think it delivers a lot of value, especially for Ruby community and Ruby ecosystem. It brings a lot. Yeah.
Definitely. Well, let's move forward so we can finish in maybe half hour or something like that. Not much more. We are in different time zones. Thanks for the people that are staying late. I think Serdar is the most the one that is more in the side. Other issues were about project management, and it's a great concern. Crystal is big. Is the biggest project that I've been working on. Like, there are a lot of followers, a lot of activities and opinions, and it's great, and collaboration. So specifically, their concern were about the amount of issues and PR and the life cycle of issues and PR. There are a lot of issues created. Someone gets buried in the new ones. someone's call more attention than others. The effort is always limited, like the energy is limited. And I know it hey, why this is not getting attraction. So first thing is that there's no a clear way to address the best way to handle all the PRs and the attentions. Like it's hard. Some topics are more interesting to some people. Some others have the knowledge to handle the others. And I don't know, John, do you want to handle this one? You had some input regarding the process that we can do.
Yeah, I think it's whether there was the suggestion or many other projects use like some bots or something to categorize issues or to close them when there's nothing happening. But I think it's better to have like always some human interaction to be alive as a community. And for now, we don't. I think we can manage without any tools like that. What I would really like is more like a management tool which helps keeping track of status of issues and what needs to be done to move them forward. But I think this is also something where every contributor can help, like looking at issues, what needs to be done, can we fix this? And there's this service called Code Triage, which like emails you a few open issues every other day or something, and encourages you to click these issues and look at what could be the path of action from here, and this could help to move on with the old issues we are still keeping around.
Yeah, regarding automatic tools, I'm afraid about the loss of human contact. Like I know that sometimes not having contact is even worse, maybe, but it's I never like when a bot closed my issue. But it will help to ping, and if no response for a couple of times happen after an automatic ping, we can manually close. It's like it's hard. Some people say close it is better and move on. Again, I have never needed to deal with a repository with such amount of issues, and it's a great problem to have. Definitely, I prefer that problem than having no activity. But yeah, suggestions if you have experience with this kind of things, or which politics you will find it will be in the forum about that. My concern is about losing the human contact, and we are not sure what is the reasonable time span for closing issues. And if you come with a weird idea of a GitHub bot, you can implement it in Crystal and make it production ready. I will say that. Okay, then one great question that we had about it was asked by Maureen. I think that's how you pronounce it. Say, as a core team, what are the top 3 actions that the community could do to help? Does having a new team dedicated to working on bugs helps you guys to focus on the roadmap? And first of all, me and everybody in the team loved this question. It's great to read some proposals, like what can help from perspective. It's great. So I think this will, some will have some opinion, but from my personal perspective, I would like to say that, for example, I prefer to focus nowadays on language runtime and tooling, for example, but suddenly I need to care of infrastructure and process, because since I work in Manas, that's on my plate. And some issues, I let them evolve with the opinion of others. They don't need my input, I think, and then we can reach consensus. So if I will need to pick 3 things, is first, help each other to learn and find solutions to problems or issues, either as workarounds or proper solutions. But feel free to help each other, even if it's an issue of the language or the compiler, like workaround. And then the other, someone delete my notes. It's well, that will, yeah, great. Help us prioritize issues. Things like the one Johannes said, like helping triaging issues. It's really helpful because it helps us measure where the limited effort will be there. And then, as to spread the word, is an because the more power we'll have to move forward. And that means not necessarily writing code. It could be spreading the word, writing articles, writing blogs, writing introductions in different contexts, going to meetups. All those kind of things really help because it attracts more attention. So that will be my top three things: help each other, help by prioritizing, and spread the usage of the language. And those are not hardcore technical compiler things, but all those will help us, I think, move forward in a better direction. Chris, Jones, Ari, I don't know if you want to add something there to this question.
From my point of view, the one most important thing in terms of people helping the community would, because there's quite a lot of issues in Crystal which don't get any comments at all. They might be bugs and nobody has time to work out if the bug has propagated off their machine or not, or what perhaps the cause of the bug is, or if it can be reproduced. And so there's a lot of effort which goes into taking a bug report and triaging it. And I think if you really want to help Crystal, the most helpful thing you can do is come and triage new issues and help those issues which just get no feedback at all, because those issues are probably, there's certain issues which you're just bound to get loads of comments on, but some which just end up with none and end up with no tags, and helping us categorize and tag those ones is very important for the health of the project, I think, and any help with that would be greatly appreciated.
Yeah, also what's like an important part is documentation. Not just the APA docs, we also have the language reference, the Crystal book repository with a lot of open issues where things need to be done. And I think this is often like a task which is not very appealing for developers, because it's like, yeah, well, I'm not a poet, I don't I write code, not prose. But it would really help to work on this. There are many features of the language and the compiler not documented at all or only partly, and this could really benefit to improve things. Also, I think we'll should start shortly on having like a proper introduction tutorial guide tour of Crystal, which has been proposed many times now, and I think we will start with that soon to have a combined effort on that.
Okay.
Brian, you're muted.
Thank you. There are a couple of questions more that I hope they will be smaller, so we can go through them quickly. There were some questions about Sebastián Escarano regarding if we consider contacting recognized sites that use Ruby nowadays and to help them migrate to Crystal. And at least not from Manas. No, we didn't contact to, hey, change your stack. It's hard to make that, and especially because things that I mentioned earlier, if we don't have the 1.0 badge, it's hard for some companies to trust, even if they don't know. Like doing an easy check, is it 1.0 or not? It's to their stack, although we already covered if it's production ready or not. And other like for sure, the more programmers there are on the companies, it's easier to convince because they will have some experience with the language. So I would say that keep spreading the news to help getting Crystal more used. And this kind of goes together with what can we do to make Crystal more used. Is about having more meetups. Like in whatever city you are, you can try to start hosting meetups and groups. The one question is if there is community here in Buenos Aires, and no, there is not. We are here in Manas, we are ex-employers in Manas, and friends from colleagues that they know and they use Crystal, for example, but we don't have a regular meetups here in Buenos Aires. We made some meetings, and I would like that to happen again. So if we're in Buenos Aires, if you want to help organize meetups, just give us a call. And I don't know if the people want to mention which city they live, they will be happy to say, yeah, I want to participate. I don't know if you know each of us where we live. Like I am based in Buenos Aires, Argentina, like really south there. I will let everybody decide if they want to say where they live in the city, so they can push meetups if they want or not. They live somewhere in the earth, I promise you. Yeah, okay. And the other, one more question was about specifically Manas. If Manas has been hired to develop an application in Crystal and if it is in production. And the answer is yes. We have clients that came to Manas and say, hey, we want to develop this in Crystal. And that is already open news. That's the last contract of that was Sikova. You can read that in Manas Twitter account or in our site. So yeah, that happens. Luckily, yay. So yeah, that means it might be production ready. Sikova, it's about a blockchain thing. There's a mobile app. There's an API server. There's a database. So it's all the stack there present. That's all the one that there are some couple of questions that I'm leaving out, maybe because they are partially answered already on the others, or are really related. Is there anything else you want to answer? Any of the team that you want to answer from what you have seen on the chat, or you want to add? Chris, Johan, Serdar, Ari.
No, just thank all the community for making Crystal great, because I always see every day there's a lot of activity and opinions and comments and issues and pull requests, and it's fantastic. It's really great working with everyone on this really super fun project. So thank you.
Yeah, there was a question by Vlad who asked about a centralized shards repository. And yeah, I've been working actually on this. It's a database which pulls in shards releases and links them together and builds dependencies, graphs, and all this stuff. I have a prototype working, and I think I'll have it public as a preview in the maybe next days or something. I don't know. It mostly does what I expected to do for showing it to someone else. So yeah, I think this is it's essentially similar to like Ruby Toolbox or something. So it allows to categorize shards, and yeah, it just there is no it's not a central index or something, because you can use shards with any Git repository or something, but it tries to collect things that it knows about at least. Right now I have in the database about 500 shards, most of them from the awesome Crystal list, and yeah, recursive dependencies of these shards. So I think it's going to be a nice tool.
Another thing I would quite like, it'd be nice to work on that and perhaps add something like an automatic doc tool, so which hosts documentation, automatically builds documentation for shards as well, because I think a site like that would be quite useful for the community, even if it doesn't end up being official. Well, actually, I kind of hope it doesn't end up being official, but yeah, it would be nice to work with you on something like that.
Serdar, any final topics you want to cover?
Well, I'd like to repeat what Ari said, and I'd like to thank everyone for being part of the Crystal journey so far, and for the next part. And the thing is that seeing the community grow from nearly 0 to like 4 or 5K people on Twitter, also on Crystal Shards, like having 100 shards to now like close to 5K. I mean, it's a great thing to see, and the traction is getting bigger and bigger, and I really hope it goes like that. And yeah, I mean, it's great to see what's going on. It's been getting more exciting every day. Thank you, everyone.
Okay, great. I think that covered all. There are a couple of questions left. We'll try to answer later or have some follow-ups. But thank you all for the time. We know it's been a lot of time, lots of information. I'm really glad to push some conversation around all these different topics, because as I said at the beginning, it's not that we have the regular chance to speak about all these things in this way. Although we try to hold some meetings in the core team every now and then, but it's this instant to put things. So thank you all for the time, for the questions, for the support, and for pushing this to making this a community and not just a language. That's the main thing. So yeah, thank you all. We will be like going off air in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Bye, everybody. See you next time.
Bye.
Bye, everyone. Thanks.
Bye. Thank you.
Goodbye.